Good evening, folks. Hope you had a lovely weekend behind you. We're going to dig into another article concerning, well, again, the gift that keeps on giving. Star Wars The Last Jedi, 3 years in the making. People are still talking about it, and therefore we get more of these kinds of articles. So, this is an article from CinemaBlend called The Main Reasons Some Star Wars Fans Have Issues with The Last Jedi by Jason Ingolfsson. Huh. Interesting. Okay, this is an article that was published about 4 days ago. I meant to do this earlier, but, with things out of the way, I'm able to freely tackle this article. It's no secret that some Star Wars fans have issues with Star Wars The Last Jedi. It sparked a new unprecedented wave of anger and hate from the Star Wars fandom. You don't say. That reverberated throughout the internet. After it was released, director Rian Johnson received death threats. The backlash and sensitive climate even scared off potential filmmakers from working on future Star Wars projects, and some Star Wars actors deleted their social media accounts due to frequent abuse. Frequent abuse of what has been said here has yet to be proven. Okay, Rian Johnson receiving death threats and going against the people who have criticisms with his work, even though Rian Johnson has repeatedly on Twitter made very edgy responses to the decisions made in The Last Jedi. Even he's come out in certain interviews. So he really doesn't care what people say against his movie. Rian Johnson still continues to remain proud of his piece of art. The backlash and sensitive climate scared off potential filmmakers. The backlash and sensitive climate. Yeah, we live in a politically divisive world where it's even affecting popular media, and fans of existing IPs and brands that have been influenced by political media and the climate are not very savvy or happy about it. But it's not really just a backlash. This is a film that really that destroyed the franchise. In other words, the following film that came out a few months since The Last Jedi was Solo, a Star Wars story, and that was a colossal failure financially. A movie that cost $300 million because they switched directors around, therefore the extra budget raises led to the film not performing to the standards that, in terms of Disney Star Wars. It wasn't even a $1 billion hit. It wasn't even a $600 million hit. It underperformed, therefore it was a colossal failure. And so, with that being said, all the projects concerning Disney Star Wars, whether Rogue One, The Force Awakens, and even Solo, had behind-the-scenes troubles. Therefore, filmmakers do not want to pursue working on a Star Wars film because of the troubles that they have, the troubles that the films that we've seen in the past few years have endured before they were released on the silver screen. So yeah, it rattled some. While some fans have been noted as having bigoted, sexist, and overall vitriolic issues with The Last Jedi. Okay, having bigoted, sexist, overall vitriolic issues. Okay, so the issues with fans having issues with The Last Jedi are not entirely bigoted or sexist. They didn't like the decisions made in the film. They are not compelled by the new characters. They are gutted and disappointed at the treatment of the original trilogy characters. I don't know why the bigot and sexist label is being thrown around. People did not like the movie because it did not satisfy, at this point, the majority of Star Wars fans. People did not like seeing a Luke Skywalker. Well, we'll get into that later, but again, they're making it political. The filmmakers, the people who are for the film, and pretty much Lucasfilm and Disney, they've made it political. Therefore, because the film was not very good in its storytelling, they like to point the fingers out to the fans and say, hey, you don't like this movie. Maybe that's because you're a sexist. It's Ghostbusters 2016 bullshit. Instead, I will try to tackle some of the legitimate story character, narrative, and plot issues fans have raised against the movie. After all, according to Rotten Tomatoes, while fans seem to share the opinion that The Force Awakens works, they greatly diverge on The Last Jedi. Critics all around seem to love the film, while plenty of fans tend to have a lot of issues with it. So let's dive in. Luke not being a badass Jedi warrior. What detractors will say. At the end of Return of the Jedi, Luke stands victorious as a Jedi Master. As a Jedi Master, I mean, okay, in Return of the Jedi, he was a full-fledged Jedi Knight. He wasn't at Master tier skills, but he was still skillful enough and powerful enough to even contest with Vader this time. So I'm not sure if he has reached Jedi Master. I'm not sure why the Jedi Master thing seems to be what fans think of him. Well, we could say we wanted him to be the Paragon, the Jedi Master, 30 years after Return of the Jedi, but Luke was still a Jedi Knight. So with his fight with Vader and then being overwhelmed by the Emperor's power, Luke wasn't at Master tier level to defend himself, which is why Luke's engagement with Darth Vader led to the whole redemption arc for Vader to help Luke overthrow the Emperor, but for the right reasons. We always wanted to see Luke in his prime Jedi form, using his powers at the fullest, fighting for the New Republic. Yes, that's what we wanted. Instead, The Last Jedi, we got a cynical old hermit who despised the Jedi and wanted nothing to do with Rey and the Resistance fight against the First Order. Luke Skywalker's character at the end of Return of the Jedi wouldn't have acted this way. Even Mark Hamill doesn't like Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. Plus, when Luke does fight Kylo Ren, in the end, he's only an astral projection. And using that Force ability ends up killing him. So, yeah, if you guys aren't familiar with this term. So, spoilers, at the end of the film, Luke Skywalker, instead of fleeing the island that he was exiled himself to, Luke Skywalker does show up at the last-ditch effort to save the Resistance cause. But instead of being there in person to confront Kylo Ren, it is revealed that Luke Skywalker had Force projected himself light years away across the galaxy into the planet where he confronts Kylo Ren. There was so much build-up to Luke's appearance in The Force Awakens. All we got was a cranky old wizard that eventually dies. We were ripped off. So this is the first counterpoint this writer makes. Return of the Jedi takes place 30-some years after the events of The Last Jedi. People change considerably in the matter of 30 years. Yes, people over time tend to change their views, their biases, their personalities in a way, shaped by the experiences that they endured before this time jump. Now, Luke Skywalker, from what we saw in Return of the Jedi, was a more hardened, more learnful Jedi Knight at that point, but he was still Luke Skywalker. He still made right choices. He still wanted to do the right thing. He still had his virtues. But at the same time, he was still vulnerable to any sense of seduction to the dark side. But he was still able to make the choice to not fall down into that pit, and still made the choice to redeem his father, Darth Vader, back into Anakin Skywalker. Seeing his father died after saving him from near death against the Emperor, burning him in a funeral pyre. Yeah, I guess that could traumatize someone, but Luke Skywalker would not be a cynical old hermit who gives up on the Force, but we'll get further down to this paragraph later. But I don't believe that for a sec, that people can change their character in a matter of 30 years. Rian Johnson argued that it's a disservice to Luke Skywalker to assume he achieved some kind of permanent video game power-up after The Last Jedi, which makes sense. Why should we expect him to be the same person? Because we expect him to be the head of the next generation, the true example of the Jedi Order. This weird thing that Rian Johnson makes, to assume he achieved some permanent video game power-up is a disservice. Well, Rian Johnson introduces a video game power-up in The Last Jedi at the very last minute, where Luke projects himself across the galaxy. Now, we know it wasn't permanent because that Force ability ends up killing him. What of the other characters who had some video game power up without actually getting anything, or never been acknowledged or addressed since then? Like, training Rey. Rey's lesson that Luke gives to him was not about lifting rocks. The Force isn't about lifting rocks as she responds. Pretty much the essential fundamentals of the Force. It's about having peace with your train of thought, having peace with yourself in order to be one with the Force. And to be one with the Force, you have to be pretty much what Yoda emphasizes in The Empire Strikes Back. Feeling the Force around you, that you can become one with the Force, and therefore you can channel the power. With Rey's response about the Force lifting rocks, guess how the movie ends? Without much training, she ends up moving an avalanche of rocks to help the Resistance escape. And the thing is, Leia, who we understand has been a military leader in the Resistance, in the Rebellion. And I don't like to point to ancillary media, but I know that I read somewhere that Battlefront 2 did not even get any script notes or any ideas what the story was going to be for The Last Jedi. So it is pretty much shown that Leia was not engaging in any Force training. She was still running the Rebellion cause at the end of Return of the Jedi, since Battlefront 2 bridges between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. But then somewhere in The Last Jedi, she gets blown out of space, and then she survives the vacuum of space by creating a force bubble or force field and flies herself back into the ship that she was blown out of. Anyways, keep going. Luke Skywalker is a different person when we meet him again in The Last Jedi, especially because of the traumatic events that happened to him in the Jedi Temple. Ben Solo slaughtered Luke's apprentices and burned the temple to the ground. Racked with guilt for being the reason Ben Solo turns into Kylo Ren, Luke Skywalker goes into exile. It makes total sense why Luke Skywalker will feel defeated after spending 30 years of his life training Jedi only to see it. We never explore the training aspect. We get two of the same expositionary dialogue with other Jedi. That was delivered by Han Solo and then through Luke Skywalker. We never get to see the training. We never get to see any implication. Snoke corrupting Ben Solo slowly into the dark side, where Luke gets the idea to invade his nephew's tent to try and kill him in his sleep, which is something Luke Skywalker would never do. This is an out-of-character decision. Luke Skywalker, from what we know, redeemed a genocidal leader of the Empire who has killed planets worth of the populace and even a mass number of rebellion personnel, and still finds redemption in Darth Vader. But then when Ben Solo becomes corrupted to the dark side, instead of just counseling Ben, or at least talking to him, Luke Skywalker just has the idea to try and kill him. It does not make any sense. And therefore, Luke Skywalker loses his camp and his apprentices because Ben Solo just randomly wanted to kill Luke's apprentices just to set an example and to take Luke's other apprentices, therefore the Knights of Ren, which were never even mentioned or acknowledged in The Last Jedi up until The Rise of Skywalker, who are just a bunch of bumbling group of cosplayers. Okay, it makes total sense why Luke Skywalker would feel defeated after spending around 30 years of his life training Jedi only to see it come crumbling down. He's done, he's not wasting any more time in the fight. Why would he choose to not be part of the fight? Why would he also abandon his best friend and his sister from partaking in any causes for the greater good? That's not what Luke Skywalker would do. I understand that the expectation that Luke Skywalker should have been running into the fray to fight the dark side. We all wanted to watch Luke continue his hero's journey. But The Force Awakens never gives us any indication that should be an expectation. We were tipped off from the beginning that something must be wrong with Luke if he's hiding somewhere. A lot of blame can be put on The Force Awakens in retrospect. All the characters needed Luke because the whole Resistance and First Order conflict seems bigger than it weighs on the characters, so Luke has to be important. That's what the whole entirety of The Force Awakens relied on. But then we were subverted our expectations with a despondent Luke Skywalker who refuses to hang on his ideals for the Force and drink green seal milk. Also, Luke Skywalker not being what we want him to be is the point of The Last Jedi. Star Wars fans build up these expectations with theories and fanfictions. By doing so, they steal the thunder of the storytellers, trying to give them something fresh and special. That is the biggest issue with The Force Awakens that we can also blame on. The Force Awakens was riddled with mystery boxes, mystery ideas, a lot of hanging questions, a lot of ambiguous plot beats, a lot of things that were set up for the next film to pay them off in some way. It's not on the fans who have built up these expectations and theories and fan fictions, because The Force Awakens was a film that led to many theories. Rian Johnson knew the only way to give Star Wars fans something different and new was to subvert the false expectations they've been building for years. That is why it's bad writing. You subvert on expectations for something good that was left from The Force Awakens, therefore you do the opposite. You build up Luke to be the next hero type and mentor to guide these new characters. And how does he subvert it? Well, Luke Skywalker hates the Jedi and thinks that everything is pointless. Okay, next. Leia's Space Mary Poppins Force move is cheesy. The scene where Leia is blasted into space and supposedly dies and then miraculously comes back to life and flies through space. Like Mary Poppins, it's cheesy to some fans. Okay, I don't think people criticize Mary Poppins to be very cheesy, but you know, it's a pretty important film in terms of the history of Disney being one of Walt Disney's last films. But you know, I think to me it's just like a standard family movie. The special effects are bad. The look of her flying through space with her arms stretched out is laughable. Wait, stretched out is laughable when it should be is laughable? Okay, I'll go with that. Wow. At any special moment they try to create fell flat. Yes, the special effect is stupid. It's awkward. It's the big... Ultimately, like, to me, sitting in the theater watching that moment, it was like the big jump the shark moment. That made no sense. It was completely illogical, and it's insane that they just randomly introduced this plot beat into the film. Before this, we weren't given any indication that Leia was officially trained in the Force. Yes, that's right. We weren't given any indication other than the weak plot reveal that Leia is a sister to Luke, therefore she could be Force sensitive. There were only a few hints of Force sensitivity, like in The Force Awakens, when she sensed Han Solo's death. Her ability to survive the vacuum of space and fly through its safety feels like it came out of nowhere. As a result, is a tease with a flimsy solution. Now, sensing Han Solo's death in The Force Awakens is a passable character beat to give to her, because it's her sensing through the Force that she just lost her ex-husband and father of Kylo Ren, or Ben Solo. That seems okay. The fact that she just randomly does this ability that even exceeds Yoda based on what we have understood about the Force and its limits through Yoda. It's just a weird device that, again, it's so random. And the funny thing is, it's never addressed. Nobody goes to Leia and say, "Whoa, Leia, how'd you do that? You just died in space. How did you survive?" Nobody ever begs the question in the film, as we, the audience, should expect. Okay, it also raises a lot of questions and problems. If Leia is this powerful in the Force, why is she looking for Luke at all? Again, there's no payoff to this. Even when they're in that final fight in Crate, there are moments where that could work to serve Leia's plot armor, but it never happens again. It's introduced, but then it's randomly dropped throughout the rest of the movie. Why doesn't she use her own powers against the First Order when they're invading Crate? Nothing about this scene works except as a Deus Ex Machina to save Leia from dying. Okay, and to his counterpoint, the scene with Leia is certainly unexpected and controversial. Even Rian Johnson admitted that he expected it to be a stretch. Okay, a stretch is definitely a light way to put it. It's so monumentally out of nowhere and it's stupid. It's not without precedent though. In Return of the Jedi, Luke tells Leia she has the Force too. It's assumed that Leia has been trained in the Force by this point. No. The Force Awakens does a poor job in explaining the backstory that while I was referring to EA's Battlefront 2 that is built on ancillary media that you have to consume in order to get the full picture of the whole trilogy, which is, again, an example of lazy writing within the films themselves. I think the films should not be a product of more media. The media should be a product of the films, as strongly as they should be written. For Rian Johnson, the scene is less about her extreme power and more about the survival instinct. He likened it to stories about parents with a toddler caught inside a car and then have superhuman strength to rescue the child. This is such a bizarre comparison. I don't think nowhere in the history of reality would this ever happen, and this is just a strange comparison that Rian Johnson makes. This is a survival moment for Leia, a one-and-done experience. Yes, it's a one-and-done experience that never reprises or is ever explained ever again. That's bad writing. It's just giving her plot armor for the sake of she has to survive in this movie. That forces her to muster all her strength to crawl back into the fight. All she does was just shoot a crash First Order shuttle that Finn and Rose were piloting, and then they crash landed into the bunker, through the giant door on the base. Now, thanks to the Rise of Skywalker, we know that Luke did train Leia in the Force, and that she mostly put that life behind her, but eventually helped train Rey too. Because of The Last Jedi, J.J. Abrams had to put it upon himself to include some flashback scene where Luke is training Leia in a very awfully captured motion capture effect that they put on Leia. And then they have to have her train Rey because Luke doesn't want to train Rey. The last surviving original trilogy character, who is a woman, has to train the new woman in the Force. While at the moment Leia's floating to safety scene might have been an unbelievable shock that it rubs fans the wrong way, I think with the knowledge that she was trained, the scene doesn't come off cheesy or forced anymore. It makes perfect sense. Okay, so he's saying that because of the Rise of Skywalker, now The Last Jedi makes sense. So he's retroactively following the Rise of Skywalker, which is another pile of cards that was a disaster, to make a defense for The Last Jedi, where Leia throughout the Rise of Skywalker, considering that Carrie Fisher passed away, and they try to make some CG use to resurrect Leia, she doesn't do anything that insane or ridiculous as that Leia in space moment. Okay, moving on. It has too much humor. The Last Jedi opens with Poe Dameron prank holding for General Hux. Some fans feel the juvenile humor is not only cringeworthy, it undermines the fear the audience is supposed to have for the First Order and General Hux. It only gets worse from there. From Luke Skywalker throwing his lightsaber over the shoulder, to Finn wearing a leaky suit, every attempt at humor lands with a thud. All too often, the humor feels forced, too long, and too overbearing, and undermining and getting in the way of the narrative. Some feel that the humor also seems too reminiscent of recent Marvel movies, like Lucasfilm was trying to take a few notes out of their playbook. Star Wars isn't meant to be jokey and haha funny like the Marvel movies. Of the issues, here's his counterpoint. Of the issues fans have with The Last Jedi, this is a hard one to address mostly because of its subjective nature. Now, I'm not sure what he means by subjective nature. I guess subjectively a comedy, or makes you laugh, but especially in a bad joke, like a fart joke, it's going to make you laugh regardless because a fart joke is stupid and silly. But then when you think about it, you think objectively if that joke was good enough to fit within the context, it's a bad joke. Since A New Hope, Star Wars has had a long history of including comic relief, from Han Solo's bad conversation with the Imperial soldier over the intercom to C-3PO and R2-D2's silly bickering. There's plenty of humor to go around throughout the series. Sometimes the humor works well, like Yoda's childish behavior when he first meets Luke. Other times, it doesn't, like pretty much everything Jar Jar Binks does. Okay, so what he's saying here is, again, just giving excuses to The Last Jedi because throughout the entire Star Wars franchise, there's been a lot of, jokes like silly antics, silly comedy. Therefore, The Last Jedi is good. That is his logic. The good thing about A New Hope, the jokes were, they never took you out of the tension. They never took you out of any tone that it was trying to set. It felt right with the character. Han Solo's bad conversation with the Imperial soldier over the intercom it serves the plot. Han Solo is trying to stall with the Imperial soldier for time so Luke can break Leia out of prison. And C-3PO and R2-D2's bickering, that's definitely candid for the characters. And Yoda's childish behavior in The Empire Strikes Back, when Yoda meets Luke for the first time, Yoda is putting on a very childish and very invasive persona to try and annoy Luke. Now Yoda is testing Luke's patience until when they get into Yoda's hut, Luke starts to lose his patience as they're just having some stew that Yoda cooks for Luke. And that is when Yoda drops his demeanor and reveals his true color, his true nature, as the wise and altruistic Jedi Master. And Yoda's jokes within the film before that moment was there to serve a plot point. It was there to serve Yoda testing Luke's nature, his patience on things. Whereas in The Last Jedi, The Last Jedi opens with the First Order finding the Resistance, so things are about to go down, and the First Order happens to have a dreadnought that's about to obliterate the planet's surface, and also the Radis, which is the Resistance capital ship. But then, before Poe Dameron's assault on the First Order fleet, yes, he gives a prank call to General Hux, which we have not heard since 2004. So there's a lot of dated modern lingo, and a lot of we gotta pause the plot to introduce a joke. All the other jokes that follow, Luke throwing his lightsaber, Finn wearing a water suit, the stuff in Canto Bight, it's just there just to serve as gags. And even with Poe Dameron's dialogue with Hux, it comes out very Joss Whedon. It comes out like a Marvel movie, which is out of touch with Star Wars. Okay, including humor in a movie is always a risky proposition. You never know if it'll land or not. That's why a lot of directors mostly steer clear from it. Right. Directors should steer clear from any attempts at forced humor because it will not serve the story. And especially with Poe Dameron's scene, which I know it just seems like not the way I would picture his character, but I guess with all three films, his character is essentially just making fourth wall breaking jokes like a Marvel movie. As though they're afraid it will sour the audience. For some, the Poe Dameron scene is a hilarious way to break the ice from the start, but for others, it's too much too soon. No, it is not a hilarious scene. It cuts the tension. It creates a tonal whiplash with the film. Managing the proper type of humor is difficult to balance, especially in a story that has a number of conventions and expectations already built in. It's based on a franchise that has a lot of conventions and expectations built in, as should we understand Star Wars. The Last Jedi tries to subvert expectations by breaking conventions and subverting expectations by completely doing the opposite of any basic film. On the other hand, it's a good thing Rian Johnson used humor at all. For many, The Last Jedi was expected to be a dark, somber, reminiscent story of The Empire Strikes Back. While it does have some darker edges to it, Rian Johnson was adamant that everyone should be able to line up and have a little fun, even if that's turning one of the sub-antagonists, General Hux, into comic relief, which was not portrayed in any way with J.J. Abrams in The Force Awakens. I doubt anyone would have wanted The Last Jedi to be a joyless trudge through the galaxy. Okay, it's completely joyless in the fact that it's boring, the pacing is wildly mediocre, and it just has this metatextual message about destroying your heroes like Luke Skywalker. All your heroes are failures. Everything you know of Star Wars is not going to be what you wanted. And therefore, a lot of people are pissed about this approach that Rian Johnson takes in The Last Jedi. Next, they dislike Rose Tico and Admiral Holdo, or whatever. I'm going to call her Hold the Door. What detractors will say, first off, let's start with Rose Tico. Some fans think she is a pointless and unnecessary character. Finn's motives are to find and protect Rey. Rose has razor-thin motives. Yes, she is a pointless and unnecessary character. Now, this might go against me when I go further into it, but Rose Tico is introduced about, I'm assuming, 30 to 40 minutes late into the film, where she's crying about her sister, Paige Tico, who sacrificed herself in the bombing of the Dreadnought, finds Finn smuggling some things and sneaking into a shuttle so he can find Rey and warn her about the First Order's hyperspeed tracking system, so she doesn't run into the Resistance fleet. She catches Finn doing so, and then just fangirls over Finn for a bit, and then just tasers him with a space taser, knowing that he's going to jump ship and escape with a shuttle. Have some back and forth regarding the hyperspace tracker, and so that leads to pretty much a plan to dismantle the hyperspace tracker in the leading First Order flagship, which leads to Canto Bight. But let's keep going. She tags along for some reason to go to Canto Bight. On top of that, nothing she does helps the Resistance cause or furthers her goals. They don't find a master codebreaker, but they find Benicio del Toro, DJ, a shady codebreaker who ends up betraying them. To make it even worse, she runs into Finn's vehicle to stop him from sacrificing himself to save the Resistance and said the most nonsensical line ever: "That's how we're gonna win, not fighting what we hate, but saving what we love." Except, wasn't that what Finn was doing? Yes, that is exactly what Finn was doing at the last act of the movie. Saving those he loved. On top of her pointlessness, Rose Tico's exposition about more issues is way too preachy and on the nose. If she were a character people cared about, actually accomplished something, then perhaps the audience will want to hear what she has to say about the injustices of the galaxy. Yes, Rose Tico is a late and pointless character that they just introduce her right off the bat, 40 minutes late, and she absolutely does not do anything to serve the story or advance the plot or even, at the very least, just serve the cause and the Resistance. So the whole Canto Bight thing, Rose and Finn have to go to a space casino planet to find a codebreaker. What was the first thing that Rose Tico does? She scolds Finn because Finn is fascinated about the lavishness and classy nature of space gambling, that she lectures him about the fact that the planet is enslaving children and is also abusing animals that they use for racing. What does she do? They break out and they run into the space horses and slave children. She releases the horses, but she does not save the children, so her and Finn ride these horses on horseback across the casino, causing collateral damage. And so the horses are free, but not the children. The children are still stuck behind, and most likely they're going to be receiving cruel punishment for having the horses run loose, while the good guys fight the good fight. Finn, throughout the course, without serving any purpose, wants to do something that does serve his purpose in the film, and that is to blow up a First Order cannon from destroying the Resistance base by kamikazing into pretty much like the core of the cannon. And right at the very last second, Rose Tico just rams into Finn, which is another issue. They never really hinted or applied any romantic interest between these two characters. So Rose's action to save Finn out of love dooms the entire Resistance. And this was before even Luke Skywalker showed up. So in that context, they didn't know that Luke Skywalker was going to show up. And therefore, Rose dooms the entire Resistance. Okay, next. Admiral Holdo is a terrible leader and a smug, totally unlikable character. She takes commands, spouts empty words of hope, and does practically nothing for most of the time she's in charge. When Poe Dameron asks to know the plan, she refuses to tell him, instead insults him and demeans him in front of everyone. And her plan is to abandon ship on a deserted planet of Crate. Couldn't she have told him that and saved him and everyone else a whole lot of trouble? Her lack of communication and empathy and failure to get the trust of the crew caused unnecessary mutiny on her own ship. Her sacrifice might have been a bigger emotional impact if the audience actually cared for her character, but they didn't. We're more in awe of the stunt than her tragic and needless death. Okay, we'll get into Hold the Door in just a moment. So here is his counterpoint. The problem is that could be said about a lot of Star Wars characters. Lando Calrissian didn't have any motives to suddenly decide Han and Leia join the Rebel Alliance. He goes from friend to foe to friend again within a matter of scenes. He abandons his entire operation because why? Darth Vader altered the deal a few times. Okay, again, this is another example of just retroactively going against the original trilogy for certain things that The Last Jedi does, except the original trilogy did it much better, while The Last Jedi, and even the entirety of the sequel trilogy, does it very poorly. Yes, Lando Calrissian's introduction was late in The Empire Strikes Back, but they did set up that after endless pursuit from the Empire, Han and Leia had to find the nearest planet. That way they can dock and hide for a couple of days from the Imperial fleet. And so Bespin Cloud City was the first planet that they looked up, because Han recognizes that Lando is held on the planet as a chief administrator of Cloud City. Little do we know was that the Empire had already infiltrated the infrastructure of Bespin, where they were able to force Lando to portray Han and Leia. But because of some alterations, Darth Vader threatening him to leave a garrison to occupy Cloud City, which does sways Lando to not only go against Vader, but to save his friends. And get this, Han Solo had other motives behind him. He did not care about the whole rebellion cause in A New Hope. He was there to essentially just pursue the money that he needed to pay off Jabba by rescuing Princess Leia. But at the same time, his relationship with Leia and Luke does change him a bit to prompt Han to rescue Luke from the Death Star assault. So that's a character. Same with Lando, where Lando makes an act of betrayal, but he redeems himself pretty much by Return of the Jedi, by helping Luke and Leia rescue Han Solo from Jabba the Hutt, nearly being eaten by a giant anus monster. So Lando Calrissian is already a redeemed character from his actions. And even as late as he was in Empire Strikes Back, he was established, and he did serve the story in a necessary amount of screen time. Also, heroes failing. Let's see. Yet, Lando Calrissian is a beloved character in the Star Wars movies. My point here is this: characters can be enjoyable and admirable even if they're not fully formed or don't have concrete motives. To a point, you could enjoy underdeveloped characters not having much motives, but that's also a flaw too. You gotta enjoy the characters more so than what you're given at face value. You gotta know their interests, their wants and desires, and pretty much their motivations of why they're existing in the first place. But back to Holdo. So the issue with Holdo is that she's a new admiral replacing Admiral Akbar, who got killed by being shot out into space. Poe Dameron, who receives a demotion of his ranking after disobeying Leia's orders and going through with the Dreadnought assault. And so Poe just simply asks, "What is the plan? What is the plan?" And Holdo just scolds Poe because of his recklessness and trigger-happy nature, and decides not to give out the plan. And therefore, that prompts Poe Dameron to operate out of Holdo's watch to send Finn and Rose out to Canto to find a codebreaker and dismantle the First Order hyperspace tracking device. All that leads to failure because Holdo refuses to tell everybody her plan. That is terrible. It's a contrived plot beat to set up the next thing, and the next thing that happens is everybody fails. Finn and Rose never succeed in their mission, and most of the Resistance fleet is destroyed. And because the First Order were able to gather information of Holdo's plan. Well, not Holdo's plan, but pretty much Finn was able to communicate with Poe through radio intercom, and the code breaker that they got betrayed them, overheard this conversation, and sold it to the First Order. Everything happens because Holdo refuses to tell the plan, which is a terrible display of leadership. A leader, especially in the military, should keep her troops or his troops in place and well informed of what's going to happen. Okay, after heroes failing to complete their missions is an honored Star Wars tradition. In A New Hope, Luke, Han, Chewbacca failed to successfully rescue Princess Leia undetected and ended up in a firefight and then in a trash compactor. That was a small feat of failure, but it still worked out for them because R2-D2 and C-3PO were able to communicate with Luke. R2-D2 ends up saving them. So it's not a complete failure. They still were able to rescue Leia, though at the expense of Obi-Wan Kenobi. In The Empire Strikes Back, Luke goes to save Han, Leia, and Chewbacca, but instead ends up fighting only Darth Vader, getting his hand cut off. Just because a character isn't successful in the plot doesn't mean that their character is pointless and unnecessary, but you're pointing out these examples in films that were written a lot better than any attempts in The Last Jedi. Because Holdo refuses to tell the plan, and because Rose does that stupid thing where she saves Finn but not the entire Resistance by letting Finn kamikaze crash into the cannon, they are rendered pretty much characters of no return. There is no empathy. You do not like these characters after that point. Regarding nonsensical lines and political commentary, Star Wars has a long tradition with those as well. Yoda is full of weird pseudo... Okay, I'm not sure what this has to do with Rose and Holdo. So he's pretty much just like cherry-picking dialogue points from the prequels and the original trilogy. I guess if it is to cross the weird philosophical dialogue with Holdo and the political preaching with Rose, Star Wars was never about philosophical talk or political preachiness. It was simply characters just saying basic lines of dialogue that are written to serve the story. So, anyways, regarding nonsensical lines and political commentary, Star Wars has had a long tradition with those as well. Yoda is full of weird, pseudo-philosophical lines. Yoda is the wisest Jedi Master, and the movie definitely reinforces that visually and within the character. Anyone remember this gem? Line from Phantom Menace: fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. Do or do not, there is no try. Yes, they're not just pseudo-philosophical lines, they're teachable lines. A do or do not remains iconic because the context is it is an important teaching moment for Luke to use the Force instead of just using a lightsaber. How could anyone forget? You could tear those lines apart all day. No, I guess lines from the prequels, I guess you could, well, I know that you could definitely tear those apart because they're stiltedly written, but no, you can never tear apart anything Yoda says in Empire. That's just outstanding dialogue. They sound good in the movie, but break down quickly when put under pressure. Admittedly, the original trilogy isn't as heavy-handed as political commentary as the prequels or the sequel trilogy. Well, there's never much political commentary in the sequel trilogy. You never really understand the landscape or the time and place of where the events are supposedly taking place after Return of the Jedi. So it's not as political in the prequels. But it's there nevertheless. Admiral Holdo's leadership was no better than how Han Solo behaved in Empire Strikes Back. Okay, Han Solo, Leia, and Chewie were fleeing Hoth, and the Imperial fleet by one Star Destroyer is already in pursuit of them, with TIE fighters pursuing them. And so Han Solo's quick instinct is to lure the fighters into the asteroid field, as well as the Imperial fleet pursuing the Millennium Falcon. That's an exciting moment because Han is testing his flying abilities, not only to impress Leia, but to get them out of danger by making sure all the TIE fighters get bombarded by looming asteroids. He ran around the ship like a chicken. Wait, let me see. Also, and the others were trying to escape the Imperial fleet. He didn't have much of a plan except to endanger himself and his entire crew by flying into the asteroid field, ignoring the odds. Yes, because Han Solo is Han Solo's already a badass enough to defy the odds, and that scene works. It's exciting, and Han Solo is a pretty crafty character when it comes to flying the Millennium Falcon. No one really trusted him on board that ship and constantly second guessed his every move. Perhaps Admiral Holdo didn't do things the way certain people wanted. I'm not sure, as in perhaps maybe she should, because as a leader of 300 resistance soldiers on the brink of being annihilated, you would want to keep them informed at all times. But that doesn't make her a bad leader or a bad character. Yes, it does. It makes her both those things. For me, Admiral Holdo took command in a calm and collected way, putting a hothead pilot in his place, wherein he started getting out of line. When did he start getting out of line? He kindly asked, "What is the plan?" He respectfully stood to a high-ranking military leader, "What is the plan?" And then after a few of their rebel ships get annihilated, Poe gets frustrated with Holdo's lack of information that he should know about. She knew there might be spies on board the ship. Okay, now this is never implied, and there was also the rumor that she might have been a mole in the First Order, which is what her introduction may entail, but it doesn't go there. It seems like Jason is writing the movie for himself. So she wasn't going to tell everyone what she intended to do, especially when they're up against and have little alternatives. Could she have gone about certain things a little better? Yes. She should tell everybody her plan. Sure, but that's the thing. Characters don't have to be perfect and do all the right things to be good characters. No, you want characters to do rational choices, make rational choices and actions that make sense. Holdo not telling everyone the plan does not make any sense. They have flaws and make mistakes. Characters who have flaws are better characters than those who know everything and do everything right. Characters with who perform a comedy of errors is best suited for comedy, but in a very dramatic space opera adventure, you want characters to make choices that benefit not just the story, but the conflicts that they're serving. That you are ruining them head on. You're rooting for them. But for characters to make dumb decisions throughout the entire film, it's hard to root for them. Okay, next thing. Snoke's death was mishandled. How far along am I on this? Oh yeah, just one more. We're almost done, folks. Snoke's death was mishandled. What detractors will say. In Force Awakens, Snoke was shrouded in mystery. No, Snoke wasn't shrouded in mystery. He has like a reveal in Force Awakens midway through. I mean, in terms of mystery, I guess you want to mention him in dialogue that sets up some intrigue, but no, he shows up as an oversized hologram. Snoke was shrouded in mystery, made out to be the new big bad and Palpatine's replacement. We didn't know much about him, but he was set up as potentially having a larger backstory than what we would get to see played out over the next two movies of the trilogy. His mystery was intriguing at first. In The Last Jedi, it looks like we were able to see more of his relationship with Kylo Ren and General Hux, but then there's nothing. He acts scary and intimidating and seems to wield great power, but at the last moment, Kylo Ren cuts him down and kills him. What was the point of Snoke at all other than a plot device? Killing Snoke at the end of The Last Jedi left a villain void like a black hole. It sucked all the tension and conflict out of the galaxy. So his counterpoint. Typically, the big bad or boogeyman villain trope never gets a backstory. Now, I'm not sure why does he refer him as a boogeyman? Like if we're talking Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger. That's not the idea of Snoke. Snoke was an archetype to serve as pretty much like an emperor replacement, like a discount Emperor Palpatine. Some of this comes down to psychology. People tend to fear what they don't know. So when you make it scary, when you make a scary looking villain mysterious, it makes that villain that much more scary and intimidating. People tend to fear what they don't know. Okay, the big problem is we don't know anything about Snoke. We don't know how he rose to power, how he corrupted Kylo Ren within the training camp with Luke Skywalker. We don't know anything about Snoke, so he comes off, essentially he just comes off, as many people have said it, as a fanfiction character. Just a random, head bad guy who happens to be super wise and ultra powerful in the dark side of the Force. That seemed to be the same tried and true tactic J.J. Abrams was going for with Snoke in The Force Awakens. It's been well covered that The Last Jedi is all about breaking and subverting conventions, so with that in mind, Rian Johnson not only had no intention of revealing Snoke's backstory, because he also wanted to put an end to that kind of villain altogether. Rian Johnson, not only he had no intention of revealing Snoke's backstory, Rian Johnson's script had no theory on Snoke. He didn't care about Snoke, and it's been said that while Rian Johnson was writing The Last Jedi, he tossed away J.J. Abrams' notes and outline for an episode 8 and decided to make a movie of his own. And taking some of the things that J.J. Abrams introduced, he destroyed and just completely ignored, which leads to some very inconsistent and bad continuity issues between The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens. So, as a result, both films don't feel like connected films in their own trilogy. In effect, Kylo Ren killing Snoke is saying we as fans shouldn't put up with this kind of storytelling anymore. It's tired and a thing of the past. Kylo Ren, well, here's the irony. Kylo Ren killing Snoke as something that fans shouldn't put up with is a repeat of the past. It is a repeat of the whole confrontation with Luke and Vader with the Emperor, where Vader overthrows the Emperor to save Luke, his own son. So to say that Snoke was disposed of because it's a tired and derivative thing of the past, on the basis that the scene itself is a tired and derivative echo of the past, of Return of the Jedi, which The Last Jedi seems to echo multiple times. Kylo Ren would have been the logical villain in The Rise of Skywalker, but instead, The Rise of Skywalker answers the mystery of Snoke. The reason Snoke is a hollow and seemingly pointless villain in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and why narratively speaking, they could kill him without consequences, is because he's Palpatine's puppet. Now, Snoke was supposed to be the villain of the entire trilogy, so to bring back Emperor Palpatine in The Rise of Skywalker was just a last desperate attempt to pander to the fans with fan service, while that also negates fans' expectations with the accomplishment made in Return of the Jedi rendered meaningless by bringing back the Emperor. Emperor Palpatine has been behind all of it from the beginning. This works better than ignoring Snoke altogether, and arguably, Kylo Ren was so conflicted that he might have not been the best bad guy at the end of the trilogy. When push comes to shove, a common thread fans seem to raise is that their expectations were met. Well, it's not the main reason why The Last Jedi is a bad movie. Fans were insulted. Fans were preached at by Rian Johnson's meta commentary on Star Wars by destroying everything we held attachable to Star Wars, and therefore making the conflict to no resolve meaningless after the original trilogy. Critics see what Rian Johnson tried to do and appreciate it, while lots of fans didn't care about any of that and just wanted their expectations met. Now, the expectations based on what I described here probably just seem trivial, but the expectations they wanted just a good, well-crafted movie. Now, The Last Jedi is well-crafted, but as a story, on a screenplay note, it's a terribly written film, filled with plot holes, contrivances, meaningless character arcs, no lessons, and over-preaching of themes that do not register as a film as a whole. So fans obviously dislike the film for obvious reasons on a filmmaking aspect. As a result, they aren't satisfied. To a degree, I understand where many Star Wars fans are coming from with the issues they have with The Last Jedi. At the same time, it's clear Star Wars fans have become too hyper focused under nostalgia. Now, this is a condescending way to put it out. Too hyper focused on their nostalgia, even though the Disney trilogy is built to bank on everyone's nostalgia for Star Wars. Theories and fan expectations, making it impossible to ever meet those expectations. Well, it makes it impossible because with theories and fan expectations, creators, especially with another example I have with Stranger Things, where Stranger Things 2 was going to set up ideally the idea for a sequel season to Stranger Things was never like a thing that would happen, but fans had these expectations with Stranger Things in terms of the Upside Down and is 11 truly gone? Was the Demogorgon a product of 11? And how will the kids experience life now that Will's back? And based on the harrowing adventures that they took, and therefore Stranger Things just kind of like the Duffer Brothers made choices against the expectations, knowing that perhaps the theories and plot beats that people were expecting would be too predictable for a story, and therefore they did mostly they took it to the opposite direction. Though Stranger Things 2 is it's enjoyable than The Last Jedi, though I will say it's pretty flawed. But again, it's back to the idea where The Force Awakens lifted all these theories and raised a lot of questions, but then The Last Jedi never answers it. Therefore, it makes The Force Awakens a pointless movie to rewatch. So last sentence, making it impossible to ever meet those expectations, a point I think The Last Jedi was trying to make. And I guess this is where it all ends. But yeah, so pretty much this article on CinemaBlend is, again, retroactively criticizing things about the original trilogy. Therefore, the writer is in favor of The Last Jedi, and pointing out examples compared to the issues in The Last Jedi in the original trilogy without giving much proper context or any accurate form of comparison that you can make that we can accept, which we don't. And pretty much just in defense of Rian Johnson's choices made in The Last Jedi that he's strongly supportive of. But that's pretty much it. So I'm going to close this off. But tell me what you guys think. Like, comment, and subscribe. You may sub to Madcap Productions, where I will continue to subvert your expectations by calling out Hollywood's bullshit. And hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week, and hope you have a lovely night.